Hi, this is an excerpt of a live webinar that was filmed on the 6th of June 2023. Therefore, the contents of this video are applicable from that date, and of course things may well have changed since then. This is the fourth section of this series, and this deals with higher risk buildings in occupation for the Building Safety Regulator.
Thank you very much, Andy. For high risk buildings in occupation, there is going to be a new process under the Building Safety Act, and I'm just going to very quickly, if I can, talk through that with you just now. So first of all, this only applies to buildings which are in occupation. So that could be buildings which are just completed, they've just got their certificate from the Building Safety Regulator, or they could be buildings which have been in occupation for 30 years or 40 years, whatever. Any building which is over 80 metres in height, over 7 stories, and contains at least 2 residential units. This doesn't apply to hotels or care homes or hospitals. It's only residential buildings over 18 metres. So with the Building Safety Act, they're looking at managing the risks within these buildings, but the 2 risks they're really concerned about are the fire safety risks and also the structural stability risks as well. So it's the risk of structural failure and the risk of fire safety. So those are the 2 risks which are being managed by this process within the Building Safety Act. Within the Act as well, they say there has to be an accountable person responsible for the building in its occupation. So somebody has to be nominated as an accountable person. What they're saying, that's the legal estate in possession, in other words, the individual or the company which has possession of the building, or also the relevant repairing obligation, which I'm not quite sure what that means, if I was being honest, and not being a solicitor. But again, that is a definition which is within the Act. So there are 2 parts to this. First of all, you have to register your building, and then you have to get a certificate. So the registration process is already open. The registration process opened in April this year. Any building which is over 80 metres or 7 stories and got more than 2 residential units, it can be registered. You can make your registration now, and you do that through the Building Safety Regulator. You can't register buildings which are still in construction. When they've got their final approval certificate, that's when you can make the application or the application for registration, and then the certificate follows on from that. But it's only buildings which are in occupation at this point in time can you register at the moment. So information that needs to be provided, they're calling this the golden thread. If a building is in construction and then it's going to be occupied, there should be a golden thread there, or there will be in the future. Buildings which are under construction and just about completed at the moment, they might not have the golden thread. Buildings which are 30 or 40 years old almost certainly don't have a golden thread. However, the Building Safety Act is a piece of legislation which is starting next year. It's sort of coming into effect on the 1st of April 2024, but it's going to last for years and years after that. So the golden thread will start when this process starts on existing buildings, and it's accepted that that golden thread's not going to be of the same standard that would be the case for something which is currently in design now, and it's going to have all that design and construction information available. So but there's still going to be a requirement to keep a golden thread of existing buildings or information on existing buildings as well. And then in terms of the information for the golden thread, mandatory occurrence reporting, again, that's a requirement for buildings in use. So if you have a fire safety or structural safety risk or occurrence, you've got to report on that and maintain a record of that. And also residents' engagement plans. And also the registration document should include a residents' engagement strategy, and also identify what the residents' duties are as well, because not all of the fire and structural risks can be managed by the accountable person. Some of those risks have to be managed and have to be the responsibility of the residents, because the accountable person won't have access to individual person or private residents' dwelling houses or flats within the building. They'll have some control, but they won't have full control. So the residents have to take some responsibility for managing these risks as well. So for the occupied high-risk buildings, the consultation has come out last year for a new safety regime for high-risk buildings, and that consultation detailed or gave some details about what information would be required and what the process is. So it's the registration of high-risk buildings. The building assessment certificate would then be provided by the building safety regulator. Again, you have to demonstrate or identify the accountable person. Principles of managing building safety, how you're going to manage building safety for structural and fire safety within the building, residents' engagement strategy, and the mandatory occurrency reporting. All of this information should be maintained within a golden thread for a new building, which is in design at the moment. That should be developing on or maintaining that golden thread. For older buildings, a golden thread would have to be started at some point when this process starts, and then that golden thread will be built upon and be maintained with the building for the life of its building, for the life of that building in the future as well. Duty holders are also identified within the Building Safety Act for existing occupied buildings, and the accountable persons or accountable persons identified within there. There's also information within this consultation and the Act about enforcement. If you don't want to play along and you're a high-risk building owner and you decide to ignore all this, there are enforcement powers. Those sanctions are pretty similar. I think they are very similar, 6 months or unlimited fines. You know, it's quite serious if you're the identified person or owner of the building and you decide to ignore all this. There are some real teeth there to make sure this happens. And there's also a review and appeals process as well, just in case you feel that the building safety regulator's not playing fair or doing it right with you. So from April this year, the registration process opened. 12th of April this year, you could register your existing building if it's in occupation and it's a high-risk building with the building safety regulator. So again, it has to be a high-risk residential building, so 80 metres tall, with more than 2 residential units in it. The principal accountable person has to be identified for each building, or somebody authorised by the principal accountable person, and that person is required to complete the registration process. The actual registration process is relatively straightforward, filling in a form, identifying your building or notifying the building safety regulator that your building comes within the Act as a high-risk building, and that's pretty much it. Relatively straightforward. The fee, £251, reflects that. It's just a registration process. Nothing else will happen after that. When you actually make your registration or apply for or register your building with the Building Safety Regulator, there is a form which is within the Building Safety Regulator's online portal. And you have to include names and addresses and contact details for accountable persons or the accountable person or multiple people if there's more than one. If there's a single point of contact, a nominated individual who will act as a single point of contact for the principal accountable person within the organisation, that person also has to be identified within the application form, name, contact details. You know, it's putting down those people. It's really putting people into crosshairs here. So if the building is owned by a local authority or a social landlord or a similar sort of organisation, that has to be explained within the registration process as well. And there's also information which is relatively straightforward about the building's address, what the description of the building is, how old it is, number of stories and such like. So all that information needs to be provided as part of the registration process on the registration form, and then that goes on to the Building Safety Regulator's register of high-risk buildings, and then that will lead to further actions by the Building Safety Regulator, which is the application or the provision of a building assessment certificate. So this building assessment certificate is something which the building safety regulator will issue to buildings which are in occupation, and it's basically a certificate to confirm that you've gone through this process and the building safety regulator is satisfied that the building is safe to occupy. The application is made through the building safety regulator's digital platform, so you can make it online. However, the application must be accompanied by a whole raft of information. Safety case review or report is the principal piece of information, which is it's basically a risk assessment, which I'll come on to later. Also, a copy of the residents' engagement strategy, that should be included within there. And for buildings which have only just been occupied, that can be relatively a fresh document. For buildings which are in occupation or have been occupied for some time, it could be a development of what's already in place. And also information about mandatory occurrence reporting, so anything which has happened within that building regarding fire safety and structural safety, that has to be recorded, logged, and then put into this application form. And also prescribed information demonstrating compliance by each accountable person that they have met the requirements of their duties. So there are duties under Section 89 of the Act, and all of those accountable people have to provide information demonstrating that they have met the requirements of their duties. And at the end of this certificate or application form, they have to make some form of declaration, or we understand they're going to have to make some form of declaration to say that they have satisfied themselves, or that they feel that they've done everything to satisfy their duties. There will be a cost incurred for this building assessment certificate. We're not sure how much that's going to be, but we suspect it's going to be a little bit more than £251. There's going to be quite a lot of work done by the building safety regulator in terms of checking all this information and satisfying themselves that the building is safe to occupy. And because there is quite a lot of work involved with that, they're able to recharge that back to the accountable person or the building owner. So part of the information which is required for the application is a safety case review or a safety case report. So the principal accountable person for an occupied high-risk building has the responsibility to produce this, or their nominated individual. And it's really a risk assessment of the building's safety risks, and it's a safety risks associated with fire safety and structural stability. And you've got to identify the risks and identify what mitigation measures that have been taken to manage those risks. And it's very, very similar or very familiar to people who are used to doing risk assessments. Also CDM, there's a lot of similarities here with that. And also a brief description of any steps taken under Section 84 of the Act by the accountable person for the building to manage those risks. So there is a structure involved with this safety case review or report, but that will be the responsibility of the principal accountable person to produce this report and to include it within the application for the certificate. So I've hopefully been able to manage to do that relatively quickly, quick enough for Andy, or else he'll tell me off. But the other thing is with this, how can we help at Quadrant Building Control? Well, first of all, if buildings are under 18 metres, they're not high risk buildings as defined by the Act, and therefore go to the building safety regulator, we can provide the building control approval. We can do the building control function. We're going to be registered building control approvers, so we'll be able to undertake our role to do building regulations approval on all those classes of buildings as we always have. So that could be anything from a small domestic extension to a big distribution centre, a supermarket, although we don't get many of those anymore, to big industrial schemes, or anything which is hospitals, anything which is less than 18 metres and doesn't have residential sleeping accommodation in it. However, on those buildings which are, or those schemes which are high risk buildings, we can provide a consultancy service. This will be outside our role as building control approvers. This will be a consultancy service that we can offer alongside our building control approval service. And we'll offer pre-application advice at Gateway 1 stage, also a review of the package of information which is going to go through to the Building Safety Regulator for Gateway 2 applications. We can assist in reviewing the design change process. So if there's a proposal to do any major design changes or swap materials, we can provide advice as to whether that's going to be acceptable or not, or how it's going to be received by the Building Safety Regulator. And we can also do site inspection and a monitoring service as well if you want us to do that. And that process could also assist in demonstrating to the Building Safety Regulator that you, as a duty holder, have fulfilled your function to ensure that the building is built in accordance with the building regulations. So having a third-party verification as well as the Building Safety Regulator's inspection can assist you in getting or more likely to get the Gateway 3 approval completed. And also review of the information at Gateway 3, we would assist and provide a review of that information to make comments to try and improve the chances of getting a successful certificate from the Building Safety Regulator. So that consultancy service would sit alongside our building control approval service. It's separate, but it'll be a parallel. So it doesn't form part of our building regulation function. It is a consultancy service in the same way that you get a CDM consultant to perhaps help you with the CDM regulations and provide you with advice for that. We see this as a very similar process and a very similar role. So, but that would only be applicable for these high-risk buildings. There is also a lot of information available on the HSE's website. Building Safety Regulator sits within the HSE, and they provided quite a lot of information within their website. There's also legislation and guidance and a bit of consultation documents and the consultation replies and what the outcomes of those consultations are within the government's website for Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, I think it is. And there's also steering groups as well, which are published or sponsored by the government as well. On the bottom there, we've got the Quadrant website, newsletters, videos. If you go to the website there, you can sign up to newsletters. We're going to continually update the newsletters and provide information as and when it becomes available on new developments. We also have got a YouTube channel, so there is going to be small YouTube clips within there. But please go to the website, register for the newsletter, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and also we're going to have this webinar again later on this year to try and update with further information.